friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Lawn Fawn's High Five, A Bug Deal, Our Friendship Grows, Magic Messages, and Stinkin' Cute. So I've stamped the images I'll be using on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink, and I'll be coloring with my Copic markers. I'm going to begin with my bees, and for those I'm using Y13, Y15, and Y17, starting with the Y17 and shading them just depending on the way that they are going. The two that are straight up and down are going to go on opposite sides of the card, so that's why I did one on the left and one on the right. And then I'm blending out with that Y15 and filling in with the Y13 for the highlight. And then I will use the Y15 to quickly color in the centers of all of the flowers. Then I'm going to bring in R11 and R20, and I'm going to give my bees some rosy cheeks with that R20. And then I'm going to start coloring in all of the little flowers, placing that R20 right around the center, because that is where I wanted my darkest color to be concentrated, and then I'll go lighter on the ends of the petals. That's going to help them look a little bit more concave as well, which gives them a bit of dimension. And I did color them all the same because I want them to look like they're all on the same tree, so they would be the same color. Then I blended out with the R11, and I left some white space at the end of each of the petals. I am going to end up bringing a third shade in to fill in that white space because I just didn't like the way that it looked. Sometimes you can leave the white and it looks nice, but I think these flowers were just too small for that. So I'm going to bring in R000 and just add that to the ends of each of those petals. And I really like this combination for those flowers. It really reminds me of springtime and cherry blossoms, or any kind of little blossoms like that are just budding on the fruit trees. Then I'm going to bring in BG10 and do the bee's wings. And then I'll use E55, E57, and E59 for my tree branches. So I'm starting with the E59 and placing that on the underside of the branch and all of the little extra branches that are kind of stemming off from the main one. And I'll do that on the second branch as well. I am holding that marker a little bit more straight up and down so that I can get just the very tip, because it is a very narrow area to color, especially on that smaller branch. Then I'll bring in the E57 and start to add that mid-tone in. Some of those narrower branches are going to get filled in completely with the E57 just because there's not room to squeeze in 3 shades. But anywhere I can, I will also add in that E55 because it really does make it look nice and highlighted, like the sun is shining down from above, which in this case, since it is an outdoor scene, it would be. So I'm just filling in with that E55. I really like this combination for wood. It's definitely the one that I reach for the most often whenever I have to color trees or branches. Then I'm going to move on to my leaves, and I'm going to do them in 2 different combos, but very similar combos. So the first one is YG03, YG05, and YG07. I'm going to start at the base of each leaf with the YG07, blend out with the YG05, and then add a little YG03 on the end of each leaf. The 2 larger ones are from A Bug Deal, but all of the smaller ones are from Our Friendship Grows. I really wanted a mix of sizes, especially since we have 2 different sized branches. I thought the smaller ones would suit that better, and also I'll add a few of the smaller ones on the larger branch just to kind of mix it up. I'm also going to do some of the small leaves that are connected to the flowers. That flower is from the Magic Messages stamp set, and for those I just used the darkest and the lightest shade. Then I'm going to bring in the YG09 because I did want these to look very similar. It is going to be the same tree, like I said, but I just wanted there to be a bit of variety since there are so many leaves, so I wanted to break it up by just having two tones. So for the rest of the leaves, I'm using YG09 for the darkest, blending out with YG07 for the midtone, and then using YG05 for the highlight. And then I'll fill in those last couple of leaves on the small flowers, again just using the darkest and lightest, and then I'll trim these images out with their matching dies. Next, I'm going to take the beehive from the Magic Iris Beehive add-on and trim that out of some sunflower cardstock. And I wanted to add some more definition to it so it would match the images and not look so flat. So I'm going to bring in my Copic markers once again. And for this, I'm using the same three shades that I used on the bees, the Y13, Y15, and Y17, but also adding in the YR27 for an extra bit of depth. I'm going to place that YR27 right above the stitching detail that makes each little section of that beehive, and then I'll start blending that out. And I'm working in small sections because this paper is just regular cardstock. It's not meant for alcohol marker blending, so I didn't want to have the paper dry out too much. I wanted to work with it while the paper was still saturated, so I'm just doing a few sections at once. So I'm blending out that YR27 with the Y17, then bringing in the Y15, and then the Y13, and then I'll just let that dry. So it's going to look a little bit darker right now than it will end up looking just because that paper is saturated. So once I have the first three sections done, I will continue down that beehive and fill in the rest, just repeating that same process. And I do think that the coloring really added a lot. I toyed with the idea of adding some definition with Distress Oxide inks, but it would have been nearly impossible to do each of the individual sections of the beehive. You would have really had to mask that off, and since it's not perfectly straight, it would have been difficult. So it was just easier to go in with Copics and do that, so that's what I decided to do. Originally, I also colored the inner circle of the beehive with my Copics, but I'm going to change my mind and end up going in a different direction. I knew that I wanted to heat emboss my sentiment in that area, and I just didn't think that the white heat embossing that I wanted to use was going to show up nicely enough on the yellow background. So I was just afraid that the sentiment would get lost, so I'm going to end up changing my mind in a little bit and going with some darker colored cardstock instead. But I think either would have looked nice. I just would have had to maybe stamp my sentiment in black ink, but that's not really what I wanted to do for this card. But anyway, it's definitely an option. I'm going to move on to my background, and I'm taking a piece of Bristol smooth surface cardstock, and I'm going to add some sky by bringing in the Lawn Fawn cloudy stencil and some Salvage Patina Distress Oxide ink. So I'm just choosing one of the sides and adding my cloud formation there, pressing that ink down hard as I lift off the stencil, and then using lighter pressure as I go up the panel so that the ink starts to fade a bit and looks nice and soft. And then I just turn the stencil and continue down the panel. And sometimes I will also flip the stencil over so you get 4 new card formations, especially on this one because there's no grass in the scene, it's all sky. So I kind of ran out of the 4 sides, and I didn't want to repeat the same pattern of the clouds. So I just flipped it over, and then you have something new to use. So I did, I think, 5 rows of clouds, 4 or 5, and then down at the bottom I just added some extra ink so that that last area wasn't stark white. And I'm going to just blend that onto the corners to make them extra defined. And then I'm going to do some splatter detail to give this background a bit more movement. So I'll press some of that ink onto an acrylic block, add a spritz of water to it to make it more fluid, and then pick that up with a thin paintbrush and tap it off the side so I get a nice fine spray of droplets. And then I'm going to bring in some Gansai Tambi Starry Colors as well, because I wanted some gold droplets to kind of tie in with the honey theme. So I'm mixing up one of these shades, and then I'll tap that off the side as well. And I'm not going to do quite as many as the blue. I just wanted there to be a few here and there. But then I'm going to set this panel aside to dry completely. In the meantime, I am going to work on that sentiment, so I'm using a piece of Lawn Fawn chocolate bar cardstock, and then I'm bringing back in the Magic Messages stamp set. I'm going to use the one that says, "Thank you so much." I like how the little flower embellishments around the sentiment are going to tie in with the flowers that I'll use on the tree. So I'm going to prep my cardstock using the Rabbit Hole Designs powder tool, and then ink up my sentiment using Versamark ink. It's just a clear sticky ink that works great for embossing because it grips a hold of that powder and holds it to your cardstock while you heat set it. So I inked that up twice to make sure I had a good impression. You can see there that it is. And then I'm going to coat that with some white embossing powder. This is the Lawn Fawn white embossing powder, which I really love. I just keep it in the big bin because it makes it easier to use, and it's definitely my most used embossing powder. So I'm going to heat my heat gun off to the side for about 30 seconds and then bring it to both the back and the front of the cardstock to eliminate any warping, and heat that until it's all nice and melted. And then I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using more of that sunflower cardstock, and this time I'm stamping in dough ink because I don't have a dark yellow ink, but I thought the browns would go nicely since we have the brown from the tree branches. And I just did the honey pot and wand and the sentiment, "You're sweet as honey." So now I'm ready to start assembling. I've trimmed down that focal panel with the Lawn Fawn outside in stitch rectangle stackables, and I'm going to glue that to my card front. It's an A2 standard size card base, so 4 1/4 wide by 5 1/2 tall, and it's going to leave a little rim of that yellow sunflower cardstock showing around the edges, which will tie in to the beehive. I've added foam tape all along the back of that, and I'm going to line it up over the sentiment and take my time, make sure it's on there nice and straight, and then I will just press that down to lock it in place because the foam tape will kind of grip a hold of it. And then I'll add more liquid glue to the back of the sentiment. But before I adhere that to the card, I want to grab the big tree branch and get that where I want it to use as a placeholder, so I know exactly where to add that beehive on the card. So once I'm happy with that, I'm going to just pop that down into place, and then I will add some foam tape to the back of that branch as well. And just leave off the foam tape on the one little branch where it's going to overlap the beehive. And then I will line that back up at the top of the card, make sure it looks like that hive is hanging from the branch, and then press it down into place. And then I have the smaller branch. I'm going to use a little bit of foam tape on the far edge, and then just liquid glue where it will overlap that hive, so it looks like some of the branches are coming in from either side. Then I can start to add my leaves, and I'm going to use a mixture of foam tape and liquid glue just to add some dimension to the scene and make it look like some of the leaves are a little bit farther back than others. So the one in front is popped up with foam tape, but the one in the back is glued straight to the card. And then I'm just going to sort through all of my images and pull out all of the leaves so I know how many I have to work with. And I'll start adding them to the scene wherever I think they should go. So I'm going to have one coming down in front of the beehive from that bigger branch, and I'll have one coming up in front of the beehive from the smaller branch, and just kind of add them on here and there using liquid glue if they overlap anything that's already popped up, and then foam tape for anything that's going to just go flat on the background. And I really do like the combination of the two different sizes of leaves together. Because they are so similar in style, just one is bigger, one is smaller, they really do work together well and look like they are from the same tree. But having those different sizes, I think, just gives it a much more realistic look. Just placing the different sizes at different parts of the branch, using the smaller leaves for the smaller little branches and twigs, and the bigger leaves for the ends of the main part of the branch. So next I'm going to add my bees, and I want to lay them out so again I know if I need to use foam tape or not. So I have the two that are the same but just colored with shading on different sides, and then the other bee coming in from the left hand side. So I'm just adding foam tape as needed wherever it won't overlap the beehive once again. I did do it wrong on this first one. I did it on the opposite side from what I needed to, so I had to shift that foam tape over and add it to the area that I had already added liquid glue, so it was a little bit tricky to get it to stick at first, but I managed to get it on there, and then just added liquid glue to the other side, and that way the bee could kind of hang off the edge of the hive. And the second bee I'm just going to glue straight onto the hive, so he's just getting liquid glue. And then that last little bee was originally going to hang over part of the hive, but then I decided there was too much empty room down at the bottom corner there, so I decided to pop the whole thing up on foam tape and place it a little bit lower to take up some of that space. I also stamped and die cut two of the bee trails. I knew I wasn't going to need more than two because you're only going to see just the smallest amount of these, but I like adding it because it does give the card a bit more movement. So I'm just adding some liquid glue and adding them so that they're hanging off the card, and then I can come back and trim off any excess after it's dried for a few seconds. This glue dries very, very quickly. The second one I did trim in half though, so that I could add it in the two different places. And then once that glue is starting to adhere, I can just clip off the ends with my Cutter Bee Teflon coated scissors and trim them to the size of that focal panel. So I'll just adjust that until I have it back where I wanted it. And that first one was just hanging over a tiny bit too much, so I'll just trim that one down as well. And then I can start to add in all of my flowers. So the flower without the leaf is from the Stinking Cute stamp set, and then the flower with the leaf is from the Magic Messages. And again, because they are so similar in style, I thought that they would work together on the card. And I like that now I have a combination of two different sizes plus the addition of the leaf. It also just adds a lot to the card and makes it look a little bit more realistic, I think, because all flowers on a tree aren't budding at the exact same time, so they're not all the exact same size. So I'm just going around and adding them here and there until I get a look that I like. I use liquid glue for all of the flowers because they're all sitting on top of one of the leaves. Two of the ones at the top though are on the leaf that is flat on the card, so again it just adds a little extra dimension. And my camera is about to cut out on me again. As I've mentioned, I'm having a few issues with it. It's a super old camera, but anyway, you saw most of it. I just added those final two leaves towards the top. And then I brought in some Stardust stickles to fill in the centers of each of the flowers and also the bees' wings, just to give them a little bit of sparkle. And that is going to finish up this card. So I will lift that up to the camera so you can see all of the detail, hopefully catch some of that sparkle and shine, and then show you the inside once again. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. It just screams springtime to me, and I am so ready for that. So if you enjoyed it too, please be sure to hit that like button and leave me a comment down below. I'd love to hear from you. Subscribe if you haven't already, and ring that notification bell if you want to be alerted whenever I post a new video. All of the products I used are listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick up anything for yourself. And I'll also put up 2 more videos on screen that I thought you might also enjoy. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.